Hi, how you going? So today I thought I'd tell you about my favorite camera, and it's not what you would expect. It's not my current mirrorless, it's not my first DSLR, it's not a vintage film camera. It is something that even 7 years after it was released and 7 years after it commercially bombed, I still find myself reaching for it. It's this little guy. It's the HTC Re. It's something that most people have never seen, and whenever I use it, I've never had anybody who recognizes what it is or what it does. It was released in 2014, which is about the same time as the GoPro Hero 4 and just before the GoPro Hero Session, which is a similar form factor, like similar size, but they serve different functions, and I had both and I used them both regularly for different purposes. So HTC said when making this that the purpose was to focus on the moment and not on the camera, which is interesting because by making something so unique looking for a camera, they kind of ensured that everybody would be looking at the camera when it was used and not and sort of losing focus on the moment. It's got a 16 megapixel sensor, it's 1080p 30 frames per second, it's got an f2.8 aperture, it's got an 820 milliamp hour battery, but specs don't matter, and they specifically didn't matter with this, and now with most cameras they don't actually matter. What matters is usability. What matters is how fun it is to use and how much it makes you want to get out there and use the camera, and that's really where this one shined. Probably the main feature of this camera is the lens. It's a super wide angle lens, 146 degrees, which is really wide angle. It was built for selfies, so you just stick your arm out, and you've got a really wide angle in. I'll put in some examples so you can see just how easy the selfies are on this. I also grew up watching 90s skate videos with that fisheye look, so I really like the wide angle stuff, which is why I own multiple GoPros. I just like that look. It's also really good for leading lines, which is another type of photo I really like taking. And I think what I really like about the wide angle is it made me look for different angles. You're not just standing in front of something and taking a photo of it. You're getting down to different angles. You're looking from the side, you're looking from below, you're getting closer to things and just looking for interesting shots.
Laptop slot and aerosols out of your bag, please. Laptop slot and aerosols.
It's also stream enabled. You could stream up to half an hour of footage straight through your phone to YouTube. It's not something I ever used, but it was an interesting function for 2014. So I believe this was also before the wide angle selfie lens on phones. They had the front facing cameras, but I don't think they were that wide angle that made the selfies easy. I'll go through the things I really like about this camera first. Firstly, as I mentioned, selfies. This is where this camera shines. I've got long arms, but even for people who don't, you stick the camera up, you press the button, and you've got a selfie. And because of the field of view, I've had selfies with tons and tons of people in them. I'll put up some examples, and it makes that easy. The ease of use of this is one of the biggest things. It automatically turns on when you pick it up. There's sensors in there somewhere, I'm not sure. There's one button on the back, and that's all I ever use. You press the button once, and it takes a photo. You hold it down, and it takes a video. It's really that simple. It's a few seconds from picking it up to taking the first photo. The ergonomics as well, it fits in the hand really well. It just sits there, your thumb ready to take the photo. And this is interesting because most cameras are built with your traditional camera shape, whereas this, it's actually built to sit in the hand nicely. And when you tuck it into your hands, your fingers, even with that field of view, your fingers aren't in the shot. Yeah, really easy to do. The size is great. It fits in the pocket easily. It's not chunky. And yeah, it's just the right size to be able to carry with you at all times. It has a tripod adapter screw on the base, which just makes it easy. But at the same time, you can just sit it flat. It's balanced enough that you can sit it on most flat surfaces and it won't fall over. And that's really good for taking videos, taking time lapses, or even taking remote triggered photos. It also has expandable storage, which a lot of cameras this size do not have. So in this little flap here, you have a micro SD card slot, and that was expandable up to either 32 or 64 gig, which was tons of space. I don't think I've ever really had anything more than 8 gig cards in these, and I don't usually run out of space on them. The battery life as well is actually quite good. Because there's no screen to drive, that doesn't draw a lot of the battery like a lot of cameras do. And I think it said you got an hour and 40 of full HD footage before the battery would deplete, but you've also got probably months of standby time. You can pick up the camera 2 months after having touched it and there's still battery life in there. So even with that standby, it's still great. So one of the really easy things to use about this is the app. I really like the app. It's simple, it's easy to use, and that is one of the features that just makes this great. So the app takes about 10 seconds from starting the app on your phone to being connected through the little Wi-Fi module in the camera, and it's really easy to use and it's straightforward. You can scroll through all the photos on the camera. You can look at the view that the camera's actually seeing through the app, or you can change any of the settings you like, choose between the different video modes. You can set the timings for a time lapse, and the remote trigger is also really good. Point the camera somewhere, or you sit it on a flat surface, or you put it on a tripod, you open the app in your phone, press the button, and you've taken your photo. And then there's a simple button to press to download it straight onto your phone. The other thing, as I said, is time lapses, and this is one of the things that I love most about the camera. You sit it somewhere, you open the app, you press the time lapse button, you set your timings and you press go, and the camera just does it all itself. You can choose to stop the time lapse yourself, or you can choose to stop it after a predetermined amount of time. And this is one of my favorite features. I've always loved time lapses, and this just made it easy. I'd tried lots of other little cameras to that point to try and get a simple time lapse camera, and this filled that purpose nicely. So I think the big thing about this is it's fun, and that's what photography and video creation should be. That's what cameras should be. They should be something that you grab them out all the time and you use them because it's fun to use and you enjoy doing so. Every time I got this out, people are intrigued by it, and therefore they're willing to have a photo taken, or they're willing to have their video taken. And that's one of the reasons I'm still using it 9 years later, is because it's still really, really fun to use. And now to the negatives of this little HTC Re. So the build quality is probably the first one. These are the two cameras I've used the most, and both of these have tape holding the bottom together. Little cracks form, and this happened to friends' cameras as well. Little cracks form in the base and start to move up the camera. And this isn't from mistreatment, this isn't from dropping them or anything like that. This is just something that happened through normal use. The tape does seem to have stopped the cracks moving any further, but it's unsightly and I don't really like it, and it would be nice if it wasn't required. The next big one is that part of the marketing said that these were waterproof to a certain point. One of the photos in the marketing is people in a pool taking a selfie underwater, and I had two separate friends who bought this at my recommendation who had them die when using them underwater. When that's in your marketing and people use it for the first time and the camera dies, it's pretty disappointing for users. One of the other big negatives for the HTC Re was the initial price. I don't think they quite knew where they wanted it to be, and because of the unique form of it, they probably spent quite a lot on research and development. So it was priced around the $250 mark, which was comparable to mid-range GoPros, but it was capturing a different market. So I saw it, wanted one, but didn't pay that price, and I was spending too much money on cameras around then, still am. And I think they got down to $50 in the end, which is why I have a few of them now. At $50, they're an absolute bargain. At $100, that was still a good deal. At somewhere between $100 and $200 was probably the good point for the price. But $200 to $250 is just too much for what it was and for the kind of consumer they were aiming at. It's not great in low light, but again, I don't think that's what it was intended for. So we can't really mark that down for that. The GoPros at the time really weren't that great in low light either. One of the other big issues for this is you don't know if a photo's been taken unless you see a little light up there or on the front if you're taking the selfie. And in bright light, with the reflective back button, you can't always see that that's been taken. So you end up taking a few, which fills up the space on your card and takes more memory. So the simplicity of the camera can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing. I know how it works. I've done it thousands of times, but whenever anybody else uses it, they regularly accidentally trigger a video, and they're holding there, taking a selfie, they hold the button down, and all of a sudden you've got a video of them trying to take a selfie rather than an actual photo. So that is overcome pretty quickly once you've used the camera a few times, but it is a trap for beginners. Without connecting to the app, you also have no idea how much memory is left on the card and how much battery is left in the camera. But as I said, the battery life is great, and they don't take up a lot of space, and they have the expandable memory, so again, not that much of a problem. So there is built-in stabilization, which GoPros at the time definitely didn't have. I'll put up some examples of videos with stabilization on and off, and as you can see, there's not actually that big a difference. Given that the GoPros at the time didn't have it, and that they only really got good about 4 models after that, it's probably not a big thing, and it definitely didn't stop me using it at the time, and that can all be fixed in post now anyway, to a degree. So that, again, is not a negative that would stop you using the camera. So probably one of the biggest negatives of this camera from my use is pocket shots. Because it senses when it's close to your skin and turns on. If you've got it in a pocket, it turns itself on in your pocket, and it's really easy to just bump that little button and take a photo, or if something holds that down in your pocket, then the video starts taking, and all of a sudden you've got all of these blank videos. When I was filming for this video, I had it in my pocket, and as you'll see, there was so many pocket shots in there that by the time I got to taking photos and videos that I actually wanted, the card was full and I had to go through and delete them all. Because the app is really easy to use, deleting all that stuff is easy, but it is just a step that meant that I couldn't use the camera when I wanted it to, and I had to do extra steps. So why have you never heard of this? Why did it fail? I think, as I've discussed, the price was a big factor. It got down to a bargain price in the end, but that's just because they were getting rid of it all after HTC had lost a whole lot of money. If they had have priced it a bit more reasonably to begin with, I think people would have bought it, and I think it would have done a lot better. So I don't think HTC actually knew what they wanted the HTC Re to be. It was partially marketed as a GoPro competitor, but as you can see, the build quality wasn't there, the waterproofing wasn't there. At the same time, I think they wanted it kind of for the influencer market, but 2014 was before that really blew up, so I think they were ahead of their time in that way, and as such, they didn't capture the market that they were hoping for. The equivalent of this camera now is probably the Insta360 Go, which in a lot of ways is a very similar camera, but is not as good. It doesn't have the expandable memory, it's not as easy to use, you need the case to use it properly. I don't believe the app was as good, it had overheating issues, which I never had with this, so I think this was well ahead of its time, but because it was ahead of its time, it didn't capture that market in a way that it might have done if it had have come out now with slightly better specs. Because it didn't do very well for HTC, they didn't release a follow-up model that addressed some of the issues and didn't give it a chance to establish itself in the market. You can't really blame them, they would have lost a ton of money on this, but it didn't have that chance to get itself into the market and to really compete with the other cameras on the market at the time. But despite all of those issues, I still really love this camera. I still use it, I still keep one in my bag, and it's just, I really like the photos that it takes. I really like the fact that this is still the easiest selfie camera I've got, as much as some people frown on selfies. So some people had issues with the audio quality, but I wasn't really using it. I wasn't vlogging with it. I wasn't using it in a way. Most of the videos I took were short little clips or time lapses, so where the audio isn't as important anyway. So I didn't see that negative that some people would have seen, and it might have done better if the audio had been a lot better. You press it again to stop the video. It's really that easy. You've got a flashing light in the button. I don't know if it'll show that. That shows that it's recording a video. You've got a similar light on the front. But despite those issues, and because of all the good things I said about this camera, I really like the HTC Re. It is my favourite camera. I still carry it. I've got a few of them, and it's just so easy and nice, and it makes shooting fun. I think that's the biggest part with this. Cameras are there to aid in capturing things around you. You want to do that as easy and simply as possible, and that's what this enabled. It made shooting fun. every time I get it out, someone would look at it and just go, "What is that?" And you get interesting reactions out of people when you're using it, which makes for interesting selfies with them. It's just a really fun little camera. So thank you very much for watching this. I'll link to an HTC Re in the comments. I think they still exist on Amazon 9 years after they are initially released. Let me know in the comments if you've got any questions about the camera itself or its functionality. But otherwise, have a great day. Thank you.